This is a story of a city, our city, Portland. This is a story about how people came and settled in our city and how they built a great city. It is a story about good times and bad times. It is a story about how people like you and me can help other people and make life better for everyone in our city. For thousands of years, native people roamed the area we now call Portland. They belonged to a tribe called the Mitnoma. The Mitnomas had many settlements in our area. The largest settlement was on Salvi's Island, which was called Wapito Island from the Wapito root that grew on the island. The tribes used the Wapito plant much like we use potatoes today. There was also a lookout on Cancel Crest, very near where the Healy Heights Tower is today. And there was a clearing next to a beautiful river they called Willamette, which in their language meant River of Peace. That little clearing was the start of Portland. In the year 1804, two explorers named Lewis and Clark began a journey from St. Louis, Missouri to reach the Pacific Ocean. They took along 30 other men, a Native American woman named Sacagawea, and her little baby. They also took along Clark's slave York and Lewis's great big dog. In 1805, they crossed the Rocky Mountains and traveled down the Columbia River to the ocean. They had a very difficult trip. They almost starved to death, but they made it to the Pacific Ocean in November of 1805. They returned to Missouri in September of 1806. On April 3rd, 1806, Captain Clark and 7 other men took a journey down the Willamette River He stood on the bluff that is now called the University of Portland. He was the first American to see the area we now call Portland.
Oh yeah, like these guys traveled all that way. Come on.
Well, according to history, they did.
No way, they had to travel over 4,000 miles by walking or by canoe. Nobody can do that. Get real.
It was real, and I bet I can prove it.
How?
We'll read you something from their journals.
They had to write journals too.
Here's what we wrote when we were close to Portland.
November 10th, 1805, rained very hard last night. We are all wet, our bedding, and many other articles.
November 12th, 1805, our bedding also wet. Fortunately, the men are healthy.
November 14th, the rain continues November 10th, 1805, the rain continues all day. All wet.
All wet!
Okay, I get the picture. I guess they're in Portland.
They crossed the Rocky Mountains high and saw the ocean mile high. In
told everybody in the East about Oregon. Soon others came and found that the farmland in the Willamette Valley was some of the best land on earth. And they told other people.
And they told other people. And they told other people.
By 1843, thousands of settlers were traveling to Oregon on what became known as the Oregon Trail. They traveled with oxen, horses, and everything they owned in the covered wagons.
Life on the trail was hard. There were many dangers. Many people died of diseases, but they journeyed on in hopes of finding good land in Oregon.
Women on the trail had to cook, clean, and sew up clothes for the family. Sometimes unexpected things happened.
One woman wrote in her journal,
Last night, my clothes got in a wagon and the oxen ate them up.
And then, like any journey, the kids always asked questions.
Hey Ma, what happened to my new wool socks? Hey Ma, what happened to my new wool socks? Yesterday I saw your socks eaten by the big fat ox. Yesterday I saw your socks eaten by the big fat ox. Hey Mom, when will we get to our new home? Hey Mom, when will we get to our new home? I don't know the answer now. Go and milk the old brown cow. I don't know the answer now. Go and milk the old brown cow. Hey Mom, we're traveling in this tent. Hey Mom, we're traveling in this tent. I don't like the way that shakes. I think that's a rattlesnake. I don't like the way that shakes. I think that's a rattlesnake.
How did Portland get its name? Well, let me introduce you to Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Overton. Do you remember that clearing by the Willamette River? Well, Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Overton claimed it belonged to them. It probably wasn't fair, but the government in Oregon City sold them the land for only 25 cents.
Well, Mr. Overton, 25 cents for all this land. I think we do quite well.
Yes, Mr. Lovejoy, we did. Perhaps someday people will build a few houses here. Maybe a little town. Why, someday, maybe people will build a great city here.
Whoa, don't get ahead of yourself. There's nothing here but some open land and a river. I mean, this place doesn't even have a name yet. It's just called The Clearing.
Yes, but we could build a dock for ships and then the town will grow.
And Mr. Overton was right. A few houses were built, but soon Mr. Overton wanted to leave to go to California. So he sold his half of the town to Mr. Pettygrove. But he didn't tell Mr. Pettygrove that he had only paid pennies for it originally.
That's right, Pettygrove. Only $50 for all this land. You'll never regret it. Best land in the world. I mean, why buy a town anywhere else? Ding! And just for you, I'll throw in all these beautiful trees for free. And you know, free's a very good price.
Well, $50 seems like a lot of money for a town that doesn't even have a name.
I don't know. Well, at this price, I'm really saving you some money. And you know, if you don't buy from me today, I can't save you any precious money.
Okay, $50 it is, Mr. Overton, but I won't pay a penny more. So now the town is owned by Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Pettygrove, but it still had one big problem. It didn't have a name. You know, Mr. Lovejoy, this sure is a nice town, but it really needs a name. Let's see, what could we call this place?
I know. Let's name it after another town. That's what the Pilgrims did when they came to America. They named their towns after towns in England.
That's a good idea. Let's see what we could call it.
Let's name it Boston after my hometown in Massachusetts. After all, Boston is a great city, and we want this to be a great city as well.
Mr. Lovejoy, I'm from Maine, and you know, we don't think much of Boston and Maine, so I suggest we call it Portland after a very fair city in Maine.
See here, Mr. Pettigrew,
Boston is a bigger and more important city than your itsy-bitsy Portland.
See here, Miss Lovejoy. Portland, Maine is a much more beautiful city than your ugly, stinking Boston.
We should call Boston, and that's final.
No, it should be called Portland, and that's final.
Boston!
Portland.
Boston!
Portland.
Boston!
Portland.
Break it up! Break it up! You stand over there! You over there!
Hey, I've got an idea. Let's sell this by flipping a coin. You call it.
Heads! Tails!
Well, tails it is.
How about flipping best 2 out of 3?
Okay, that's all 3. Call it again.
Heads! Tails again! Best 3 out of 5?
No, Miss Lovejoy. She's Portland. Fair and square.
And so the town was named Portland.
By 1850, more and more houses were built. A newspaper was started.
A dock was built and Portland became a major port. Many trees were cut down and the clearing was expanded.
But soon, Portland got another name. You see, when the men cut down the trees, they often left the stumps still on the ground.
Harriet, let me help you up. Are you alright? I'm so tired of all these stumps everywhere on the roads. I wish the men would pull them out.
That's right, those men are so easy. All they do is sit around and drink beer. They don't even care nobody can go downtown wildfire into the awful stumps.
And did you hear what the other towns were saying about us? We're the laughing stock of the West.
They call us Stumptown.
The summer of 1873 was very hot, very hot. It was also very dry.
It was 4 a.m. in the morning of August 2nd, 1873. Suddenly a man came running out of the warehouse.
Help, help, the warehouse is on fire. Get the fire brigade. Help, help. The fire spread quickly. All the buildings and houses were made of wood, and they were very close together. The firemen tried to put out the fire, but they couldn't.
When the fire finally burned out, 22 blocks had been destroyed.
This event was known as the Great Fire. It changed a lot of things about Portland. More buildings downtown were made from bricks, and they weren't put as close together anymore.
Unlike many other western towns, the people in Portland helped each other.
They helped rebuild the town. They took care of each other.
Where are we? Did you do that? Oh. They looked out for each other, and that's something Portlanders always have done. Hopefully they always will.
train's coming.
Oh no, we better build this track quick.
I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up early in the morning. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Time to blow your horn. Dad, won't you blow? Dad, won't you blow? Dad, won't you blow your horn? Dad, won't you blow? Dad, won't you blow? Dad, won't you blow your horn? Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Romeo and Joe and singing beep bop diddle-yo, beep bop diddle-yo, beep bop diddle-yo. Romeo and Joe, hey!
The railroad arrived in Portland in 1883. The Union Station was completed in 1896. Now people could travel across the entire country from New York to Portland in just 12 days instead of months.
The railroad brought people and goods to Portland. The town grew over 98,000 by the year 1900.
Buildings began to spring up everywhere. Bridges like the Old Marston and the Hawthorne bridges were built. Soon houses sprang up on the east side.
A trolley system was built so that people could travel downtown.
Because boats had to go up and down the river, all the bridges were drawbridges.
The people liked to watch the bridges go up and down.
Bridges in town go up and down so boats can go through. Oh yes, they do. And cars have to wait, something they hate. And drivers get mad. Tough luck, too bad. But soon the boats pass, some slow, some fast. The waiting is done. Oh my, 'twas fun. A big one go round in the town. The next bridge goes up and down. There's a Burnside, Broadway, and Morrison. Oh, what rascals! They are rascals. When they double lift, it's a mighty steal. The Hawthorne is still slip for you. The bridges in town go up and down so boats can go through. Oh yes, they do. And cars have to wait, something they hate. And drivers get mad. Tough luck, too bad. But soon the boats pass, some slow, some fast. The waiting is done. Oh my, 'twas fun. Let's look around in the town. The next bridge goes up and down.
Portland is officially the City of Roses, and one of our great festivals each year in June is the Rose Festival.
There are 3 parades with horses, floats, and of course marching bands.
The Rose Festival started in 1907 in celebration of a flower that grows very well in Portland. In 2007, we celebrated the 100th birthday of the Rose Festival.
Portland is home to many beautiful rose gardens. Our International Rose Test Garden is in Washington Park, is known around the world. Peninsula Park has one of the most beautiful formal rose gardens in the United States.
Here is a beautiful song about roses that was sung at the first Rose Festival in 1907.
Beautiful palace have I on the hill, no
pictures to hang on my walls, but never a painter could match with his skill the roses that bloom in my halls. Then sing me a song of the rose, a song that is tender and true. She wears her red robes like the daintiest queen, all gleaming with jewels of dew.
Then sing me a song of the rose, a song that is tender and true. She wears her red robes like the daintiest queen, all gleaming with jewels of dew.
Everywhere downtown, theaters were being built. By 1900, there were grand luxury theaters all along Broadway Avenue in Portland.
There were no TV or radios at this time, so for entertainment, everybody went downtown and saw a show.
Are you going downtown today, Julie?
Well, of course, Liza, I'm going to ride the trolley downtown and see the new play at the Orpheum Theater.
But that's the most expensive theater in town. Why? I heard it costs $5 to see the play. I'd rather go see the symphony at the Markham Theater myself or one silent motion shows at the Liberty. You know, there are so many choices.
That's right, there are so many choices. You won't go downtown without seeing a show now, would ya? Do you have a brother or sister?
Yes.
Do you ever fight with your brother or sister?
Yes.
Well, we have a story to tell you about a very famous fight between a brother and sister in the early 1900s. The brother's name was Harvey Scott. The sister's name was Abigail Scott, who later married Mr. Dunaway, so her full name was Abigail Scott Dunaway. What were they fighting about? They were fighting about women's right to vote, or what was called women's suffrage. In 1852, the Scott family left Illinois by a covered wagon and arrived in Oregon 6 months later. Harvey Scott was 14 and his sister Abigail was 19. Harvey Scott became a lawyer and then the editor of Henry Pittock's newspaper, The Oregonian, a position he held for nearly 50 years. Harvey published his own opinions in the paper, and a lot of people believed what he said. Harvey disliked anything that suggested social progress. For example, he did not think children should go to school beyond elementary school.
If they want their children to go to school beyond age 12, let them pay. Public school should not be turned to a nursery of idleness.
Abigail became a teacher, owned a hat-making business, and published her own newspaper called The New Northwest. She was Harvey's opposite, and she was a supporter of human rights, especially women's rights.
We need to build a better world for women. Women are at the kitchen sinks without wages, the rolling pin, the wash tub, and the ironing board, always without pay. They should at least have the right to vote.
We don't want belligerent female saying heads, clap, 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 instead of faint. Ignorant boys would be dangerous.
I've always heard the difference between a man and a mule is that a man can change his mind. We are the only state in the West where women still cannot vote. It is high time the men of this state give us this right.
But Harvey was as stubborn as a mule. Every time an election was held, he wrote article after article telling the men not to let the women have the right to vote.
When will I get the right to vote over my dead body?
Well then, Harvey, my dear brother, I guess I'm just going to have to live longer than you do.
And she did.
And she did. Abigail Scott Dunaway worked for 40 years to win the right for women to vote. In 1912, 2 years after Harvey died, the Women's Suffrage Act passed in Oregon. We think that she would have liked this next song.
Mister, what do you hear? Hey, mister, what do you fear? Hey, does this sound bad? No. Just because the women want the right to vote.
Yes, we want our rights. Yes, we'll give up our rights. Do we strike up that? No, they can't let us have the right to vote. Do what? Do what? Do what?
Hey, mister, think I'm not smart. Hey, mister, think I'm
All hard.
well, mister, I got some news. Just because I want to vote my political views.
Yes, we want our rights. Yes, we'll give up our rights. Do we strike up that? No, think you better let us have the right to vote. Do what? Do what? Do what?
Hey, mister, think I don't care. Hey, mister, think you better let us have the right to vote.
Yes, we want our rights. Yes, we'll give up our rights. Do you strike a man? No, think you better let us have the right to vote. Do what? Do what? Do what? Hey, mister, we've never fools. Hey, mister, we know the rules. Well, mister, 'tis what we think. Just because you made the rules, they really stink. Yes, we want our rights. Yes, we'll give up our rights. Do we strike a man? No, think you better let us have the right to vote. Do what? Do what? Do what? Think you better let us have the right to vote. Yeah!
The year was 1918. World War I had just ended. The soldiers were returning home. Then came the Great Flu.
Thousands of Portlanders got very sick. Concerts and shows were canceled. Many public buildings were turned into hospitals.
Medicines were not very good in those days. Many people died. The flu was very serious.
But everybody helped each other, just like they did after the Great Fire. And by the early 1920s, the flu was over and business was good. Really good.
The theaters reopened, more were built. Everybody went downtown to see movies. And then there was radio.
The radio brought news.
In the news today, President Coolidge dedicated a statue in Washington, D.C.
The radio also forecast the weather.
Rain today, mixed with showers, showers tomorrow, then rain, and followed by showers tomorrow night.
And also entertainment. And now it's time for the Lone Ranger. In this episode, the Lone Ranger is on his trusty horse Silver. Suddenly, Silver stops and neighs. A shot rings out. The cows in the nearby field get very scared. The Lone Ranger looks out from behind a rock. Tune in next week to find out what happens.
The town of St. John's was founded by a man named James John. James John lives alone, except he had a cat. When he died, he gave all his money to the school district. He became quite wealthy by running a ferry boat company to take people and goods between the towns of Linton and St. John's. But he had a dream, the dream of a bridge. The St. John's Bridge was built in 1931, long after James John had died. And what a bridge it is. The St. John's Bridge is an Oregon treasure. Here to tell us about the bridge are two designers of the bridge.
I'm Holden D. Robinson.
And I'm David B. Sandman.
The St. John's Bridge is a very special kind of bridge called a cable suspension bridge. Suspension bridges can span long distances.
At the time it was built in 1931, it had the longest suspension span in the world.
Aside from being a very strong bridge, it can handle cars and heavy trucks, it is also very beautiful.
They decided to make all the arches in Gothic form, like this. If you walk on the bridge, it looks like you're sitting in an old cathedral.
That's why the parkland of the bridge is called Cathedral Park.
Over the river fair, its cable suspended in air. It was built in days long gone. It is called the beautiful St. John's. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Under the bridge there is a park for children to play, dogs to bark. It is awfully gorgeous, dark. It is called Cathedral Park. Hallelujah, hallelujah. This is our bridge and it's really great. It's the prettiest bridge in the state. It was built in days long gone. It is called the beautiful St. John's. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
On October 29th, 1929, the radio brought news.
Today, the New York Stock Exchange collapsed. Millions of dollars have been lost. Millions of people are out of work.
This was the start of the Great Depression. Times became really hard. Many banks closed so people couldn't get their money. Thousands of people lost their homes. Then a great man came along. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk because he had a disease called polio. He was very kind. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said,
Let me assert you my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We have a plan to put our people back to work, and we're calling this the New Deal.
In 1932, Roosevelt won election for president, and things got better, much better. There are two Roosevelt projects near us in Portland, the Bonneville Dam and the Timberline Lodge. Roosevelt himself came to Oregon in 1937 to dedicate these projects. There was a song he used to sing, and the whole country sang it too. It made people feel good and forget the depression. It went like this.